The muffled thunder of 1,000 engines rolls across the winter sky over Europe. Inside the belly of a B-17 Flying Fortress, a young gunner, barely 20, scans the heavens. His breath fogs the plexiglass. He's searching for enemy fighters, but also for something else. The glint of friendly escorts. Then, a crackle on the radio, an intercepted German transmission. The voice is arrogant, dismissive. It sneers about the Schwanzrote Jäger, the red-tailed fighters. But who are the men behind those red tails? To find them, we have to leave the freezing European skies and travel back to the humid, heavy air of Tuskegee, Alabama. Here, at Moton Field, the smell of aviation fuel hangs thick, a promise of flight. The sky above feels limitless, a stark contrast to the rigid, suffocating rules on the ground. This is the crucible where the Tuskegee Airmen were forged. Young black men, drawn by the dream of flying, found themselves in a segregated training program, an experiment to determine if they had the courage, the intelligence, the very capacity to operate complex warplanes. Every day they pulled on their canvas flight suits, the rasp of the fabric a constant reminder of their purpose. They stood before men like Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., a leader whose voice was soft but carried the weight of destiny. He told them plainly, prejudice and doubt would follow them everywhere. The only answer, the only way to silence the whispers and the outright disdain, was to achieve perfection in the air. Nothing less would suffice. While these men learned to master the P-40 Warhawk, politicians back in Washington debated their right to even be there. The prevailing wisdom, steeped in centuries of bigotry, was that black men lacked the fortitude for combat. The 99th Pursuit Squadron, the first of the Tuskegee units, was sent to North Africa and then Italy, tasked with proving an entire race's worth with every sortie. Imagine the pressure. Every takeoff wasn't just a mission against the enemy. It was a referendum on their very humanity. Every flight was a battle on two fronts, one against the Axis, and another against the prejudice within their own military. Let's put faces to this struggle. See Lee Buddy Archer, methodically tightening the leather on his flight gloves, his focus absolute. Picture Clarence Lucky Lester, a man who survived so many close calls, cracking a small, confident smile just before climbing into his cockpit. And there's Roscoe Brown, in the dim light of the briefing tent, poring over silhouettes of German aircraft, memorizing every angle, every weakness. These weren't just pilots. They were pioneers, carrying the hopes of millions on their wings. They were instilled with a doctrine that would come to define them, a principle that set them apart from the glory-seeking ace culture of the time. Colonel Davis's orders were simple, yet profound. Stay with the bombers, while other fighter groups might peel off to chase individual kills and personal renown. The Tuskegee Airmen were tasked with a sacred duty: protect the lumbering, vulnerable bomber streams at all costs. This disciplined approach earned them scorn from some quarters, but it would ultimately earn them the undying gratitude of the bomber crews they shielded. Their adversary was the stuff of legend: the German Luftwaffe, a force that had blitzed its way across Europe, feared for its skill and its deadly machines. The sleek, yellow-nosed Messerschmitt Bf 109s and the powerful, radio-engined Focke-Wulf 190s were piloted by battle-hardened veterans. These German aces initially held the Schwanzrote Jäger, dome breaks over the jagged spine of the Apennines. Below, a silver river of B-17s and B-24s flows eastward. On their flanks, a scarlet border forms P-47 Thunderbolts, their tails painted a defiant red. This is the 332nd Fighter Group, and their classroom is the hostile sky over Italy. In those early days, the air thrummed with competing desires. Young, hungry pilots, their hands itching on the stick, yearned to break formation and chase after the lone German fighter, to rack up a kill and earn their wings in a blaze of glory. But Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. was a stern schoolmaster. He drilled them relentlessly, his voice a constant presence in their headsets. Close cover. Stick with the bombers. It became their mantra, a reflex burned into their minds. Their job wasn't glory. It was protection. They were shepherds, not hunters. This discipline was their shield against the Luftwaffe's seasoned veterans. The German pilots were masters of the ambush, using the sun and clouds with lethal artistry. Their radio chatter was a confident, taunting bravado designed to rattle the newcomers. They'd dive out of the high sun, cannons blazing in head-on attacks meant to shatter bomber formations and scatter the escorts. But the red tails learned to be patient. They held their high cover position, weaving intricate patterns above the bombers, a net of vigilance. They learned to read the sky, to anticipate the enemy's moves, to deny the ambush. When a German fighter broke through, a red tail would be there, not with a wild, vengeful chase, but with a precise, calculated interception. It was a deadly chess match played at 400 miles per hour. Steel and sky dominate these stories, but inside every cockpit was a beating heart. A waist gunner in a fortress, watching the flak bursts walk closer, mutters a quiet prayer into his oxygen mask. A young Mustang pilot, adrenaline screaming in his veins, fights down the primal urge to peel off and pursue a fleeing Messerschmitt 109. He sees the kill, the victory, but he also sees the gap that would open in the bomber stream if he abandoned his post. He holds steady. The bomber is the mission. First blood came not with a roar of celebration, but with the quiet, deadly efficiency they had been taught. A red tail slides onto a German fighter's 6 o'clock position. A short, controlled squeeze of the trigger. A burst of cannon fire. A black cross on a gray wing falters, then tumbles, vanishing into the clouds below. No cheers over the radio, just a calm report and a return to formation. The war unfolded across the map of Europe. They flew cover for the embattled troops on Anzio's beachhead, their shadows crossing the desperate shores. They escorted bombers that hammered the crucial rail yards of northern Italy, watching columns of smoke rise to meet them. The air grew thick over the oil fields of Ploesti and the factories of Vienna, a deadly garden of flak bursts where every second was a life-or-death decision. The sky was crowded, chaotic, and unforgiving. Respect wasn't given. It was earned in the brutal currency of repetition. It was earned in sorties flown through sleet and blinding rain. It was earned nursing a coughing engine back across the Adriatic, the fuel needle trembling on empty. It was earned in the quiet of the mess hall, where the men whispered of kill tallies not as boasts, but as a grim accounting, a counterpoint to the ever-present whispers of losses. Then, a new chapter. The rugged P-47s were replaced by a thoroughbred, the P-51 Mustang. Sleek, powerful, and most importantly, equipped with the range to follow the bombers all the way to their targets deep within the heart of the war in Italy wasn't just about clearing skies. It was a gateway. The 332nd Fighter Group was now tasked with a mission that would define their legacy: long-haul bomber escort. The battlefield widened from the Italian coast to the very heart of the Third Reich. Inside the cockpit, the world shrank to the glowing dials, the crackle of the radio, and the vast, terrifying expanse of the sky. From fields near Ramatelli, they'd climb, forming up with the lumbering B-17s and B-24s, their plexiglass noses glinting in the morning sun. Their new destinations were names spoken with grim resolve: Budapest, Linz, Regensburg. Places deep in enemy territory. As they crossed the Adriatic, the sky would change. First it was empty blue. Then the horizon would be punctuated by distant black puffs, like ink dropped in water. This was flak. The closer they got to the target, the thicker it became, a deadly churning black cloud that the bombers had to fly straight through. The horizon would seem to burn with explosions. The pilot's mantra, "Stay with the bombers," became more than an order. It became a covenant. Down in those bombers were men young, scared, counting on the fighter escort to get them home. The bomber crews started to notice the distinctive red tails of the 332nd's P-51 Mustangs. They saw how these fighters stuck to them, weaving a protective shield, diving on attackers with a ferocity that was breathtaking. They started calling them the Red Tail Angels. Now it's important to address a myth. The legend says the Tuskegee Airmen never lost a bomber they escorted. That isn't true. They did lose bombers. War is chaos, and no escort group was perfect. But here's the reality that forged their reputation. They lost far fewer bombers than most other fighter groups. Their success wasn't a miracle. It was born from iron discipline. While other groups might break formation to chase enemy fighters for individual glory, the 332nd, under Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr.'s strict command, stuck to their primary mission: protect the little friends, the bombers. That discipline saved countless lives, and their own tally of victories began to climb, earned in brutal, split-second encounters. These weren't tallies of swaggering aces, but of focused professionalism. Over the Danube, you'd have Lieutenant Lee Buddy Archer, a master of the turn fight, calmly maneuvering his Mustang inside a Messerschmitt 109, a dance of physics and nerve ending in a burst of cannon fire. Then there was Captain Lucky Lester, One incredible day, he downed 3 enemy aircraft, a feat most pilots only dream of. When he landed, he said little, simply filing his report and getting his plane ready for the next day. The victory was in the doing, not the telling. For every veteran, there was a rookie. Imagine a young pilot, his first real dogfight. An FW-19 flashes past his canopy. He freezes, his hand locked on the stick. Then, a calm voice from his element leader cuts through the static in his headset. "Easy, son. Match his turn. A little more rudder. Lead him. Now." The rookie fires, and a plume of black smoke blossoms from the enemy plane. A parachute drifts down against the blue. Then the voice comes again. "Good kill. Now get back in formation." That was it. Victory was a puff of smoke, a brief moment of grim satisfaction, then back to the mission. But the war on the ground never ended. Letters from home brought news of a world they were fighting for, but weren't fully part of. A letter returned, stamped undeliverable, a sign on the door of the base officers' club still demarcating white and colored areas. Every day, they lived this profound contradiction, risking their lives for a nation that refused to offer them a seat at its own table. They fought for a freedom they themselves had yet to fully experience. Then, a new threat emerged, introduced not with a bang, but with a quiet briefing. An intelligence officer unrolled a large reconnaissance photo on a wooden table. On it was an aircraft unlike anything they'd seen before. No propeller. Swept-back wings with engines slung underneath, looking like sleek nacelles. The Messerschmitt 262, a jet. The lesson was blunt and chilling. These things were incredibly fast, almost untouchable in level flight. The date is March 24, 1945. The mission: escort American bombers to the heart of the Third Reich. The target: Daimler-Benz tank factories near Berlin. For the pilots of the 332nd Fighter Group, the Tuskegee Airmen, this is the longest mission they have ever flown. The stakes have never been higher. Climbing out from their base in Ramatelli, Italy, the air thins and bites. A crust of frost glitters on the wing roots of their P-51 Mustangs. Inside the tight cockpits, the pilots breathe recycled oxygen, the moisture freezing instantly onto their masks. The silence is broken only by the steady drone of their own engines and the calm, unwavering voice of their commander, Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., coordinating the squadrons over the radio. They are the Red Tails, a name earned by the distinctive crimson paint on their aircraft, a symbol of pride and a warning to their enemies. As they push deeper into German airspace, the tension is a physical presence. The bombers, a vast formation of B-17 flying fortresses, drone on, vulnerable silver boxes against the endless blue. The pilot's eyes scan constantly, sweeping the horizon, the sun's glare, the cloud banks below. They know what's coming. The Luftwaffe is desperate, and near Berlin, they will throw everything they have left into the sky. And then, they appear. Not as specks growing larger, but as instantaneous slashes of silver against the sky. The Messerschmitt Me 262s, the world's first operational jet fighters. They are like meteors, moving at speeds that seem to defy physics, tearing through the bomber formation with contemptuous ease. Their 30mm cannons erupt, and blossoms of orange and black smoke appear on the fuselage of a B-17. The bomber shudders, faltering in its place in the box formation. The waist gunners' machine guns chatter, their tracers ringing out at empty air where the jets used to be. Panic is a virus that can shatter a formation. But the Red Tails do not scatter. Following Colonel Davis's strict orders, they tighten their protection, a disciplined, lethal shield around the bombers. They don't give chase wildly. They hold their position, waiting for the jets to make a mistake. The Me-262s, having completed their pass, bank in wide, graceful arcs to come around for another attack. This is the moment. The Red Tails pounce. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown snaps his Mustang into a gut-wrenching high-speed turn, pulling G's that threaten a blackout, anticipating the jet's escape vector. He has to lead the target by an impossible margin, firing not at the jet, but where it's going to be. Another pilot, seeing a jet dive away, drops his flaps for a split second. It's a dangerous, high-stakes maneuver that could rip the wings off his Mustang, but it allows him to turn inside the jet's radius, bringing his guns to bear for just a moment. The P-51 shudders, screaming on the very edge of a stall, but holds together. A third Red Tail pilot sees a jet braking for a nearby airfield. The jets are deadliest at high speed, but vulnerable when they slow to land. He dives, pushing his engine to its limit, gambling that he can catch the German fighter in its landing pattern. For a moment, we are inside the German cockpit. The pilot, confident, glances in his mirror. He's outrun them. He mutters his contempt for the Allied fighters, for the roach schwans, the red tails. But his derision chokes in his throat. A flash of crimson fills his mirror, a P-51, impossibly close. He sees the sparkle of tracers stitching the air behind him, walking their way up his fuselage. Fear replaces arrogance. The hunter has become the hunted. The doctrine of the 332nd is clear: protect the bombers first. But here, over Berlin, offense becomes the only defense. Every pounced-upon jet is one less threat to the lumbering fortresses. The air is a chaotic symphony of sound. The deep, rhythmic thumps of anti-aircraft flak from the ground, the crackle of mayday calls from crippled bombers, and the clipped, professional acknowledgments from the fighter pilots. Every word is precise, every action calculated. This single day's performance will eventually earn them a presidential. The sky over Berlin erupted. Roscoe Brown's guns ripped into the side of a Messerschmitt 262, the world's first operational jet fighter. The German jet, a Predator thought untouchable, faltered. A moment later, another red-tail pilot caught a second jet just as it was lining up to land, sending it spiraling down in a plume of smoke. On the edge of the fray, a third P-51 dove on a piston-engine fighter that was trying to finish off a straggling B-17 bomber. The German pilot never knew what hit him. On March 24, 1945, during a single grueling mission to the heart of the Third Reich, the pilots of the 332nd Fighter Group did the impossible. They shot down 3 of the vaunted Me-262 jets and damaged several more, all while ensuring the bombers they protected made it home. This wasn't a fluke, it was a statement. Commanders who had once questioned their ability now took sharp notice. The numbers didn't lie. Soon, the official recognition came, a distinguished unit citation, an honor reserved for the best of the best. By the end of the war, the 332nd's ledger was undeniable. They were credited with over 100 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, including destroying a German destroyer with just machine gun fire. Most tellingly, they held one of the lowest bomber loss rates of any escort group in the entire 15th Air Force. But triumph always walks beside cost. Back at their base in Ramitelli, Italy, victory rang hollow in the quiet spaces. An empty cot was more than just a place to sleep. It was a conversation cut short, a laugh that would never be heard again. A parachute harness hanging on a hook looked like a question mark, a silent testament to a pilot who wouldn't be coming home. These were the ghosts they carried, the price of their valor. The men once mocked as unfit to fly, once relegated to second-rate planes, had become the most requested escorts in the sky. Bomber crews, desperate to survive the flak and fighters over Europe, would radio in a specific request. We want the red tails. The German propaganda that once jeered at the Schwarz-Vogelmännchen or black birdmen and their painted tails now spoke their name with caution. The red on their tails wasn't just paint anymore, it was a warning. Yet the fight wasn't over when the war in Europe ended. Back in the United States, the battle for respect continued. At Freeman Field in Indiana, over 100 Tuskegee-trained officers staged a nonviolent protest against a segregated officers' club, an event that became known as the Freeman Field Mutiny. Their defiance, their refusal to accept second-class